The first numbers are in. Operation Epic Fury cost $5.6 billion in its first 2 days. We are now in day 11. 8 deaths and 140 injuries to U.S. military personnel so far. Most of the injuries minor. Still, this is no excursion. 2 gunmen fire shots this morning at the U.S. consulate in Toronto. Is this a sign of dangers to come? What about so-called Iranian sleeper cells? We're going to take a look. Division I college football and basketball are in a state of economic carnage. President Trump has an executive order. Will it do any good? Probably not. What could? Well, we're going to try to find out. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Can we talk about incursion and excursion? War is deadly serious business and challenges presidents as no other event can. And yet, President Biden and President Trump have been tripped up by bizarre language around the topic of war. You might remember Biden said this on January 19th, 2022, about Russian forces massing along the Ukrainian border.
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion, and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do.
Biden was criticized for minimizing what might come. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, not nearly the world figure then that he's become now, took Biden to task on social media, writing, "We want to remind the great powers that there are no minor incursions and small nations, just as there are no minor casualties and little grief from the loss of loved ones. I say this as the president of a great power." Incursion, that word, did not age well. Here was President Trump yesterday referring to the war with Iran.
We took a little excursion because we felt we had to do that to get rid of some evil. And I think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion.
It is not my place to play semantic games with presidents about war language, but words matter because they convey, or at least they're supposed to convey, intent, direction, and objectives. You might be interested to know that Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines incursion as a, quote, hostile entrance into a territory. It defines excursion as usually brief pleasure trip. You can decide for yourself if incursion or excursion qualify in either context. For now, it is devilishly hard to get a sense of how long this war, the war with Iran, will last. Here is the Defense Secretary today.
This is not endless. It's not protracted. We're not allowing mission creep. The president has set a very specific mission to accomplish, and our job is to unrelentingly deliver that. Now, he gets to control the throttle. And so it's not for me to posit whether it's the beginning, the middle, or the end. That's his.
The U.S. military said today was the most aggressive yet in terms of bombing targets inside Iran. Here is a summary of what's happened thus far that came this morning from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
To date, they've struck more than 5,000 targets. U.S. Strategic Command bombers recently dropped dozens of 2,000-pound GPS-penetrating weapons on deeply buried missile launchers across the southern flank. We also have struck several one-way drone factories to get at the heart of their autonomous capability.
As mentioned here yesterday, Iran has named a new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the former supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Here is Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina on that development.
There's no way you can say you won this war with an Ayatollah in charge. This Ayatollah is a religious Nazi. He's the son of the original Ayatollah. There cannot be a successful outcome in epic fury if people like that are still in charge.
Graham, we should note, has been one of the most vocal supporters of President Trump's decision to wage this war on Iran. Here is Massachusetts Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren on fears about how long this war might last.
I'm very worried about how long this will drag on. We are hearing no logical estimates about when it will be over.
Hegseth said it's over when Trump says it's over. That's why language about what's happened thus far matters. And very few, even in Trump's ardent MAGA base, would describe the events, the casualties, and the volatilities thus far, economic and otherwise, as an excursion. For more, we turn confidently tonight, as we have every night, to our Matt Gutman in Tel Aviv. Matt?
Major, I think we're hearing something very interesting here. There is some dissonance between what the administration is saying is going on, that they are dictating the pace. They will say when this is over. They are saying where this is being fought and what we're actually seeing in practice on the ground. The analysts that we have been speaking to here are saying that in some ways Iran is dictating the pace. They have brought in the Persian Gulf states. They have shut down the Straits of Hormuz. In many ways, they are prolonging this, and it's all happening by design. And the big difference they are saying between how the U.S. came into this war and how Iran came into this war is that Iran pre-planned this strategy. They knew that the Persian Gulf states were the Achilles heel for the U.S. and Israel, and that if they pressure the Persian Gulf states, if they close down the Straits of Hormuz, then those Gulf states will pressure President Trump to shut this down. And that is what we are seeing happen. This is very economically difficult on those states. They are not accustomed to war, and then they have to deal with the day after. What happens when this war ends? And they still have an adversary in Iran parked right across the Persian Gulf from them that still has the same regime and power. That is why we're being told that they have not launched their own strikes on Iran in retaliation for those countless missiles and drones that they have been on the receiving end of. And I think what we're starting to see here is that delta begin to widen between what the administration says and what we're seeing on the ground in the Persian Gulf, Major.
Matt, you mentioned the Strait of Hormuz. I read today that there are efforts by the Iranians to lay mines in that Strait of Hormuz. There was a social media post that was up, and then it was deleted by Chris Wright, the Energy Secretary, saying the U.S. Navy had escorted an oil-carrying vessel through the strait, but then it was retracted, and then administration officials told Reuters that there are no naval vessels of the United States currently involved in escorting tankers. It all seems very confused.
It is very confused, and it is confusing. So the Straits of Hormuz are this choke point in the Persian Gulf, about 20-plus miles wide. That is where Iran controls basically that area, but they don't actually have to fire at ships. They don't even necessarily need to sow mines through that area to have the intended effect that they're looking for, which is to sow enough fear in the shipping companies and in their insurers to basically cripple shipping, to stop all ships from going through there merely for the perception of threat. So what's happening is that the insurers are saying, hey, listen, it's too dangerous for you to even go through there. We're not going to insure your cargo. Or if we do insure your cargo, it's going to be at exorbitant rates, 10, 20 times what you're paying right now. That's why everybody is parked right there. And so Iran doesn't actually have to do anything. And they have said that they will not let a drop of oil pass through the Persian Gulf under their watch. But they don't actually have to take offensive action for them to be successful here. All they have to do is threaten it. And this is really putting the ball in the U.S.'s court. Are they going to escort those cargo tankers and those oil tankers through the straits? Or are they just going to wait this out and see if they can sort of pound the Iranian regime into submission? Again, we are told we are not going to see an unconditional surrender from the Iranian regime, at least not for a very long time, Major.
Matt, while I have you, I want to talk about what's going on in Lebanon. It's not a direct theater of this war, meaning it wasn't opened up, but it has become a theater of this war, and a very deadly one.
Deadly indeed. Hundreds have been killed. Initially, so Hezbollah is the main proxy, the crown jewel in the so-called ring of fire that Iran built around Israel over decades. They poured billions of dollars. They have intelligence assets there. This was their main sort of protector. And they used Hezbollah as a foil. So every time that they would get in trouble with Israel or something would happen, they would have Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon, attack Israel. Israel essentially decimated Hezbollah in 2024. And then Hezbollah, again in this war, started firing rockets and missiles towards Israel, some towards drones towards Cyprus, and Israel essentially waged a significant campaign against them. And now what we are seeing is Israel ordering evacuation orders for about 700,000 Lebanese, telling them to get out of harm's way because they are in areas where Israel is bombing. And that is a humanitarian crisis that the UN is warning about right now. So it is a side theater of this war, but it is turning, Major, into a very large one.
Matt Gutman, great stuff as always. I'm deeply appreciative. Thank you, sir. Nancy Cordes joins me now from the White House. Nancy, there was a briefing today by Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, and you had an interesting exchange. Tell us about it.
Sure. Well, the president's rationale for why he went to war now has, as you've noted and others have noted, has been shifting over time. One of the things that he started saying a few days ago was that he had to strike because he believed Iran was about to strike the U.S. Well, he went even further yesterday. He said he believed that Iran was going to strike within 7 days. And that's why he had to strike first. Then he did an interview a few hours later. He shortened that window to 3 days. So in the White House briefing today, I asked the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, where he is getting this information, because we haven't seen any intelligence that would indicate that. It's just not something that had been part of the conversation. She said President Trump came to that conclusion, that feeling, based on facts, based on information that he was getting from his negotiators. And take a listen to where the conversation went from there. There are no U.S. leaders or Israeli leaders who are making those same claims. So is he making this up to justify his decision to go to war now?
The president is not making anything up, Nancy. He is looking at this every single day based on intelligence, based on facts, and based on intelligence that he himself and his negotiators have consumed based on their, again, negotiations with the rogue Iranian regime over the past year. And the president and his team tried in a good faith way to reach a diplomatic deal through peaceful means with the Iranian regime. And Iran chose this path to death and destruction.
So again, Major, she says he is not making this up, but this is one of several examples where President Trump is making a claim, as he did with the bombing of the girls' school, where he said he believed that it was Iran that did it, that really runs counter to what people in his own administration are saying, or what people in other administrations abroad are saying.
Nancy Cordes, North Lawn of the White House. Thank you very much. I'm joined now by Mark Caputo. He covers the White House for Axios and has exclusive new reporting on the United States having conversations with the Ukrainians a while back, and in those conversations, dismissing a deal for anti-drone technology. Tell us about it.
Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, was here in the United States at the White House in August and specifically told Donald Trump, I've got a deal for you. Normally, you would think Donald Trump would like a deal, and what Zelensky offered was not just the technology, but also the know-how that Ukrainians had developed to shoot down drones. And the reason it's very interesting and sort of prophetic was that Russia, which Ukraine is defending against, is using Iranian-made drones. And the Ukrainians have figured out how to knock them out of the sky with their own interceptor drones. And when this proposal from the Ukrainians was given to the United States, they showed a PowerPoint presentation. And on that PowerPoint presentation was a scenario that essentially envisioned the United States going to war with Iran and needing a defensive network and hub of anti-drone technology to knock out these Iranian Shahed drones, these one-way attack drones, which are causing havoc throughout the region. And then nothing. The United States essentially sort of dismissed it. It never happened. Then the war begins, or whatever we are calling it nowadays, the administration is calling it, on February 28th, and only this Thursday, just a few days ago, did the United States essentially pick up the phone like, oh, hey, remember those drones and that drone technology you're talking about? Yeah, we actually could use that. And so now that's happening. Had they done it back then, there could have been a much different outcome with a lot of the drones that are incoming, both against U.S. forces and certainly U.S. allies in the region.
And Mark, I'm gathering that it's Ukrainian and U.S. sources that are providing this information, and no one is disputing the sequence of events.
No one is. At Axios, we got a copy of the PowerPoint presentation showing it. This was, I don't want to say who was given to us, but U.S. officials and Ukrainian officials both confirmed that this occurred. And two U.S. officials acknowledged to us, they didn't quite acknowledge error, but they said if there was a tactical miscalculation that was made before the United States launched its attack on Iran, it was the failure to secure this technology, which could have gone a long way to eliminating a lot of these attack drones.
Mark, one of your specialties is exclusive reporting. You also have exclusive reporting about very interesting messaging that came from the White House yesterday to House Republicans. Tell me about it.
The messaging yesterday, the messaging today.
Oh, I'm sorry, today. That's how recent
yeah,
it is.
Sorry.
It's today.
I
Forgive
got
me.
a little confused. Pardon me. Live TV.
No, pardon me, Mark.
That's okay. James Blair and Chris LaCivita, respectively, the political director in the White House and Trump's former co-campaign manager, both met with House Republicans and talked to them about what they're going to be facing in the midterms. And one of the things they said is, stop talking about mass deportations. It's not benefiting the party. It's not a winner at the polls, and it's problematic for Republicans. Now, this isn't going down very well with elements of the far right that want to talk about mass deportations and think not enough has been done. But obviously, the polling in the president's political operation shows that, at least the way the Republicans are talking about it, it's a political loser.
The reporting is so good, so exclusive, and so fast, I cannot keep up. Mark Caputo, I appreciate the time. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Susan Maloney joins me now. She is the Vice President and Director of the Foreign Policy Program at the Brookings Institution. Her research focuses on Iran and the Persian Gulf. Suzanne, give me your sense of things right now. And I know you've given an appraisal generally of what the prospects of success in Iran are. Tell my audience what that is.
Let's say, the initial hours of the conflict produced some really impressive victories for the United States and Israel, particularly the assassination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader for the past 37 years. And we've seen over the course of the past 10 days that the United States and Israel have been able to take out a lot of Iran's offensive and defensive military capabilities, the ballistic missile program, the Navy, the Air Force. That's all pretty impressive. But overall, it's really unclear what the objectives are for this campaign. The president's story has changed on a number of occasions, and we've heard different things from different senior officials in the administration. And I think what's quite clear at this point is that regime change is not likely, that Iran is going to continue to strike back and try to hurt the economic and energy infrastructure of its neighbors and try to drive up oil prices in a way that will have a political impact on the president's party at the upcoming midterm elections. All of that, on balance, suggests to me a conflict that's not going the way the White House had hoped.
And Suzanne, when you talk about Iran trying to do the things you just outlined, economically and otherwise, even wounded, it can still do some of those things from your vantage point.
Absolutely. I mean, what we've seen is the drone technology, which, as you were just discussing, is widely available. And Iran has been really a leader in that, providing Shahid drones first to Russia and now using them against their neighbors. Just those drones alone can cause disruption to air travel and can threaten the kind of economic and social and political model that the Iran's neighbors in the Gulf have been banking on. And that has been a way to shift their economies away from reliance on oil and attract investment and tourism and finance and technology companies. And when a drone goes through a hotel window, it may not have a long-term impact on the structure of the building, but it has a long-term impact on the willingness of companies to invest and tourists to come visit.
Suzanne, do me a favor. When people think of regime, they sometimes think of one person or a small group around one person. But in Iran, it is much larger than that. Can you walk my audience through that just a little bit?
Sure. This is a regime that's been in power for 47 years, and they came to power through a popular revolution, people coming to the streets, ousting the prior monarchy. And what they've done over those 47 years is try to insulate the system from a similar thing happening to them. And so we have a multiplicity of governing organizations. We have very tight control from the office of the supreme leader, which now has passed from Ayatollah Khamenei to his son Mojtaba. And there is a network of officials that is controlled by the supreme leader in every element of the Iranian bureaucracy. And they've also made it impossible for people to organize outside of a government body in any way that could challenge or confront the regime. And so there's an enormous level of redundancy. We saw this in the June war when a number of security officials were eliminated early on. Iran very quickly replaced them. We're seeing similar things happen over the course of this conflict as well.
Suzanne Maloney, really important stuff. I appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Iran is happening now. Is Cuba next? Is there such a thing as a friendly regime change? And can Marco Rubio seriously take on another job? Rhode Island Democratic Congressman Gabe Amo joins us next to talk about all of that. As we said, shots fired at the U.S. consulate in Toronto. Protests have happened there before. Could this situation be different? We'll tell you what we know. Replacing Marjorie Taylor Greene, is that even possible? Considering her meteoric MAGA rise then fall? Well, the odds are probably no. The primary tonight will, however, whittle down a very crowded field. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Welcome to the conversation. Democratic Congressman from Rhode Island, Gabe Amo. Congressman, good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me on.
So give me your sense of where the Iranian war is right now.
Well, look, it's a multiple choice answer for those in the Trump administration, and the president and the secretary of defense seem to be saying different things. Just yesterday, where the president say that it was nearly over. And today we've had, as Secretary Hegseth has defined it, the most intense strikes. So what I see is uncertainty, not only in the conflict, but for the American people who are going to start to experience the high costs of this war in more than one way.
The next thing you're going to have to decide is a supplemental spending request that's going to come from this administration to fund the Pentagon. It could be as high as $50 billion. It could be higher than that. What's your attitude about that?
Well, my perspective is approving additional funding for a war that we have not actually approved is inconsistent with what our Constitution says, and certainly gives an endorsement to the president for this illegal war that he's been carrying out. And so I cannot, in good conscience, say today, with no timeline, with no purpose, and with no real end game, that I could support a supplemental for request for funding.
I want to talk to you about Cuba because I want to play some sound from the president yesterday about that. Please play it.
It may be a friendly takeover. It may not be a friendly takeover. It wouldn't matter because they're down to, as they say, fumes. They have no energy. They have no money. They're in deep trouble on a humanitarian basis. And we don't want to see that.
Such thing, Congressman, from your perspective, as a friendly takeover? And do you think the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, as the president implied yesterday, could take over that job as well?
Well, look, Secretary Rubio has worn many hats, but he hasn't done any of those jobs well. And jobs that we require a commitment to values that we share. And one of those values is that the president cannot arbitrarily decide when he is going to take over a country. This imperialist presidency that we've experienced over this past year, especially over the last few months, leaves our world less safe. And ultimately, the hemispheric power that Donald Trump seeks is not something that anybody in Cuba has signed on to. The people of Cuba deserve freedom and dignity, and they are going through a humanitarian crisis at the moment. Look, if there are real and robust diplomatic measures taken, that is a conversation that should happen, but not another takeover from Donald Trump, who thinks he rules the world.
As you are probably aware, Congressman, lines are lengthening across the country at airports because TSA employees not receiving a paycheck or having to make other plans other than being at their day job because their money is not making it as far as it used to. When and how is this going to be resolved?
Well, as a member of Congress, I find myself in airports quite often. And it's important to me that the TSA agents are paid like they deserve to be for the important work that they're carrying out. And that's why many Democrats, including myself, have said, let's fund the rest of the Department of Homeland Security except for ICE. Because right now, Donald Trump is making a choice. He'd much rather have ICE continue to brutalize our communities than he would like to address the important needs of ensuring the people of the Coast Guard, of TSA, of vital Department of Homeland Security agencies get the support that they deserve. And so that's the choice. And the president continues to pick terror over bringing the necessary support to those essential federal workers.
Is that practical, Congressman, to write legislation that only funds some fractional part of the Department of Homeland Security?
It is. I mean, we just have to author the bill that way. But remember, the Department of Homeland Security gave themselves, right, a slush fund in the big ugly law, H.R. 1. And so Donald Trump has already said that we're treating the work of ICE separately from that of the rest of the department and giving them $75 billion on top of all of the appropriations that they've received. So to me, it's very clear that we can separate ICE out and rein them in so communities don't live in fear of the terror that we've seen.
Timeline for that?
I think the timeline is now. I mean, we have to move as quickly as possible. Democrats have offered up in negotiations alternatives to the status quo of ICE carrying out its tactics. And so the administration has a choice. They need to come forward with a plan to make sure that ICE is unmasked, make sure that they're complying with local laws, that the policies and procedures aren't hurting the American people. This is something that can be done, but the Trump administration would much rather continue to see the abuses that we've experienced over the last year.
Rhode Island Democratic Congressman Gabe Ammo, I appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
On alert after shots are fired at the U.S. consulate in Toronto. We're going to take a closer look at that and maybe the possibility of other threats either here or abroad. That's next right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner, where I love to be. Here's a look at what else we and now you, right now, are watching this evening. Authorities have searched Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, owned by convicted sex offender, who's now dead, Jeffrey Epstein, as part of a newly launched investigation to whether that ranch was more a part of sex trafficking or sexual exploitation crimes than originally known. State and local investigators conducted the search Monday. The ranch is 30 miles south of Santa Fe. New Mexico's Attorney General reopened this investigation last month after reviewing new information that came from the Epstein files. Before dawn today, 2 gunmen fired shots at the U.S. consulate in Toronto. No one was injured. Police have not identified suspects or motive. The shooting occurred 2 days after an explosion outside the U.S. Embassy in Oslo, Norway. Police say that explosion might have been deliberate and possibly in reaction to the U.S. war with Iran. No one was injured in the Oslo attack. The U.S. Embassy sustained minor damage. Here with me now, CBS News national security contributor Samantha Vinograd. Sam, always good to see you. Look, this is heavy, so let's just talk about it. The war is going on. There are Iranian sleeper cells. There are things happening in other parts of the world that have a violent undertone. Should we be thinking more actively, and are we thinking more actively about possible risks here at home?
Since military operations began about 11 days ago, Major, the threat level in the United States has increased significantly. Now, let's remember the context here is it was already high. It was high because of ongoing tensions with Iran. Mm-hmm. It was high because of threat streams linked to ISIS. And it was high because of domestic terrorists already within our borders. Fast forward to today, and we certainly have a range of actors that the Iranian regime has historically relied on that have now potentially more momentum to act out against particular targets. We have direct regime agents. We have individuals that are linked to Iranian proxies. Proxies are really regionally based terrorist group with ties to the Iranian regime. And then we have individuals that the regime has just flat out hired to do its dirty work. These are criminals. These are assassins for hire, people that engage in kidnapping and more. And so because of all that, the American people do need to be on heightened alert right now, in addition to, of course, government officials being at a heightened threat posture.
And I guess we would rank them as linked with the regime, inspired by, and perhaps sympathetic to. Because there is some indication that the gunman in Austin was sympathetic to Iran. We don't know that for sure, but that would fall into this category, this range.
With the advent of social media and the scale, scope, and speed at which content spreads, the range of individuals inspired by terrorist groups or geopolitical dynamics today is just so vast, and that's part of what makes it so hard to track them from a law enforcement and intelligence perspective. They're individuals with underlying mental health issues, grievances, that do get inspired by developments happening overseas, that do just consume some propaganda on social media and encrypted platforms that lead them to mobilize to violence, even if they've never had any direct contact with, for example, the Iranian regime. So it is a very broad group of individuals who may act based on what's happening in Iran today, and that makes the job of law enforcement and the intelligence community much harder.
A moment ago, we talked to Gabe Amo about the Democratic congressman from Rhode Island about the stalemate over DHS funding. Yesterday, President Trump implied that that stalemate is making things more dangerous because they can't do their job as fully. Is that true?
I say this from experience. Keeping the homeland safe requires a fully staffed, operational, and apolitical Department of Homeland Security alongside the FBI, alongside members of the intelligence community. And importantly, Major, it also requires really strong partnerships between the federal government and state and local partners. Those relationships have been hurt by certain developments in this country, particularly when it comes to immigration enforcement. At the same time, it also relies, you're talking about what happened in Canada, on strong intelligence sharing with foreign partners. We know things between the United States and Canada have been rocky right now. I really hope that in this moment, our foreign intelligence sharing partnerships are not just as strong as they were, but even stronger than they were when I left government 2 years ago.
Sam Vinograd, always a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Georgia's special election to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene, a potential test of grassroots energy right now, and the ongoing power of a Trump endorsement. More on that next. You're watching The Takeout. Political panel time. Let me introduce them to you. Democratic strategist Matt Bennett, Republican strategist Maura Gillespie. Matt, I want to talk to you about Georgia 14. We have an iron rule on this program. If I tease it before we go to break, I talk about it right away. So it's special election, huge crowded Republican field. I think 17 or so. Trump has endorsed one. Democrats are playing around there a little bit. What's your advice?
Stay out, do not send money, go somewhere else.
Why?
Because we've wasted so much money in that district. I mean, that is a Trump
Georgia
district.
14th, it's like plus 20 are Republican.
Yeah. I mean, and Democrats love to fantasize about beating people like, well, at least the person formerly known as Marjorie Taylor Greene before her conversion. But and we wasted so much money, and most of it online, people in good faith really wanting to go after the loudest voices on the right. It is not a good idea. There are lots of races we can win in 2026. This is not one of them.
Let me talk about Texas real quick, because would you put that in the category previously of wasting money?
Yeah.
What about this time?
Very hard to know, but I am of the fool's gold. I need to be persuaded that Tallarico can do it. He's a very strong candidate. He's going to run a great campaign. He has a shot. Beto got within 3 points of beating Cruz.
In 2018.
Yeah. Depends on who the Republicans nominate, and it depends on how bad things get. If things get really bad in the economy over the course of the next few months, Texas might be in play.
Maura, your thoughts on Georgia 14, which is Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, the power of a Trump endorsement, and any thoughts you might have on Texas?
Curious what role, if any, Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to play in this.
She hasn't said anything.
She hasn't. And so I'm kind of keeping an eye out for that. Does she go with who Trump has supported? Though she's been so vocal about how he Trump is no longer this, America First person that he purports to be, but she really is harping on that. So curious where she lies after this goes to the runoff, which we expect it to. And then for Texas, I think it's hard to Matt's point about how much they're going to go after each other. Cornyn's team has already said we haven't even scratched the surface about what we're going to unleash on
Ken Paxton, the sitting attorney general, who said many investigations and impeachment process, lots of scandal, personal and otherwise.
Yes, he's a walk-in conflict for, I think, the entire Texas, conservative values.
And Trump has still not endorsed.
Because he likes Ken Paxton, because Ken Paxton bows down to him, and I think Cornyn hasn't done enough of that to really get Trump to play ball, essentially. But I think that the amount of money that's being spent and has already been spent on that primary alone, not only is it egregious, but it takes away from other races that the NRSC and the Republican Party at large needs to be focused on. But it's an exorbitant amount of money to spend on a primary race.
$70 million.
But when you're also coupling that with an affordability message and a campaign talking about how you're trying to make life here in America more affordable, you're running on a campaign that says Republicans were elected because of their economic principles. And then you're spending
Matt, let me talk to you about what do you think this instance of delays at airports is going to have? What practical effect is it going to have on Congress? Because everyone can see that, everyone can fear it. And when you get a notice, if you go to, I saw it online today, Hobby Airport saying if you have a domestic flight, arrive 3 hours ahead of time. If you're flying internationally, 4 hours ahead of time. This is going to pressurize the situation, it feels like to me.
It really is. And look, also, it's the human beings who are having to work without pay.
Right. That's why these lines are long, because they're not there, because they have to take care of other things, because they can't afford not to be home doing other stuff.
Who can blame them? They got to drive Ubers and stuff to make the rent. It's going to put a lot of pressure on Democrats in Congress. I think there is a deal to be had. We're not going to get everything we're asking for. We should.
As Democrats.
As Democrats. I mean, I firmly believe that all of the things Democrats are demanding about changes to the way ICE is conducting itself are reasonable. But I think with this president, we're just not going to get it.
Mara?
You also think
Do you think this puts any pressure on the White House?
Well, unfortunately, the president isn't impacted by travel delays or having to get
No, he is not. Not personally.
Or filling up his gas tank. These are things that don't impact him in terms of oil costs. Because you also think about that. United's CEO came out and said, "I'm going to raise prices based on what's happening in Iran." So you couple that with the TSA delays. Houston Airport also said 4 to 6 hours to get there.
Yeah.
So
you're even more updated than I am. Most everyone is, ladies and gentlemen.
But I think about that, and yes, it doesn't impact Trump or his orbit. So does it move him? I don't know. I think if they, Susie Wiles has talked about getting him back out there on the campaign trail and going to talk to people. If they're telling him this is tough, we can't afford X, Y, Z, maybe that makes a dent.
And Kevin Kiley, California Republican, he got redistricted in a tough way, so he left the party. He's now refiled his registration as an independent. What practical effect does that have on Mike Johnson?
Well, it's interesting.
The Speaker.
We have a couple independents in Congress, so it's not completely abnormal.
He just said you can't guarantee you my vote anymore because I'm not in the party.
Because he's not trying to play. And what he said, I thought was interesting. He's not trying to make the left or the right happy. He's trying to make the people of his district happy because he's trying to serve them. And the politics have gotten so far away from what's impacting people that he's focused on that. Does that message resonate broader? I don't know. But I think the people he's looking to serve.
Matt, you got 30 seconds.
Would he have?
Because he's running as an independent.
Yeah, but would he have done that but for Proposition 50, which redistricted California and
which came after Texas, and it's a whole chain of events, the dominoes all over the map.
Exactly. So I think this conversion experience is happening a little late for the voters of that district.
Boy, a lot of conversions going on.
There certainly are.
Got Marjorie Taylor Greene, Kevin Kiley, Matt Bennett, stay exactly as you are. Morgan, let's say exactly as you are. President Trump vows to write an executive order he says will reshape college sports. Yeah, we'll see about that. That's next here on The Takeout. Oh, here we are, back in the conversation corner. I love that. Welcome back to The Takeout. President Trump preparing an executive order that he says will try to revert the economics of Division I college sports to where they were before players individually could profit from their name, image, and likeness. That's called NIL. Keep that in mind. He recently said at a conference at the White House this about what he wants to do.
This is really the future of, I think, beyond college sports. This is the future of colleges. because we're looking at numbers that are coming in and the amount of money being spent and lost by otherwise very successful schools is astounding. So we have to save college sports and save, I believe, colleges.
Ross Dellinger covers college football for Yahoo Sports, and I'm so glad to have you here. Summarize briefly what the president's getting at there.
Well,
the economics of it.
Yeah, right. In college athletics right now, there's sort of two paths that it can go down. Either you collectively bargain with athletes, which in a higher education environment is not ideal for college administrators, or you can have some kind of federal legislation that gives you regulation and rules, allows the NCAA and conferences to create rules and enforce them without lawsuits.
So you can pay this player that much, and here are the ways you can pay the player this much, and everyone understands what those rules are and has to operate within that system. Because right now, it is an unregulated environment, and players can be paid whatever they want, and if they don't like it or their playing time, they can go someplace else.
Right. College football and college men's basketball right now is sort of the only major sport in the world that has a unlimited sort of year-round free agency, right? Players can move about and can move teams whenever they want and then get as much compensation as they want. There is a salary cap, but it's hard to enforce it, again, because of lawsuits and the court's ruling that the NCAA's rules are against antitrust law. And you saw President Trump on Friday. I was there at the round table, and he railed pretty good on the judges in their decisions, and he wants to make an executive order. He's already done an executive order, actually, in July. We haven't seen much from that. And you mentioned off the air, right? An executive order is probably not the route, right? It's not legally defensible.
He can't do it. He just doesn't have any power in this particular zone, but he can use the power of the White House pulpit and his voice and the threat of executive order and all the chaos that might generate at the margins to try to get Congress to move. I want to play some sound from Urban Meyer, very well-known coach, about something called collectives, and you can explain to my audience what they are. And that's play the sound, please.
Get rid of the collectives. That's cheating. When donors, so everyone understands what a collective is. Donors put money in a pot. It's distributed to players through the coach and the general manager according to your talent level. That's not allowed. You're not supposed to do that. That's called pay for play.
Now, we did not put the camera there to capture Urban Meyer's emerging bald spot. We did not do it that way. That's a total accident. What about the collectives?
Well, you explained it pretty well, right? 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, and I guess now, when the NCAA's prohibition on athletes earning endorsement commercial rights, they used to, for years, athletes couldn't do that, right? They couldn't be on commercials. They couldn't get money off of endorsements. They lifted that 5 years ago because of lawsuits, right, in the judges and in state law. And that allowed athletes to then do endorsement deals. Well, what became of endorsement deals? They became straight booster cash to players disguised as endorsement and commercial deals. And so that's what we're seeing.
Ross, what's happening in Congress?
That's a good question. So you mentioned it earlier.
We're going to have you back.
Yeah, sure. President Trump's roundtable, I think, did spark congressional action. So there's a bill in the House that would govern college athletics. There is talk of a bill in the Senate with Senator Ted Cruz, Republican, and Senator Maria Cantwell, a Democrat. I believe they are getting together this week. So this has sort of sparked some action. That's what's needed is congressional action because, as you mentioned earlier, an executive order won't cut it.
Right, because there are pieces of legislation that do broadly govern these aspects of television rights and other financing for colleges, and that's really what's going to happen. No president with a stroke of his pen, or maybe someday in the future, her pen, can solve this problem. But it is happening now. It's playing out right before us. And just in case anyone was curious, March Madness is coming. Ross Dellinger, thanks so much. Great to have you here.
Good to be on.
Appreciate it. Happy Tuesday, everyone. You know what this is? Quick reminder, The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. Daily Report coming your way next.